So these are for kids that may be having trouble reading?
They're the schools that we know are more at risk for failure.
Okay.
It's not in every school system. In Michigan, there are 42 school districts and 165 schools.
Okay. And so those kids that may have or schools that have a higher percentage of sort of at-risk kids, then this coach goes in and helps the first grader or the kindergarten or the second.
The teachers.
Okay.
The coach trains the teachers. It's teaching the teachers a different way of teaching reading to children. And over this coach in this school, because every school that has the Reading First program has a coach. Now, it may have been another teacher in that system that got trained to do this, or it could be someone that was hired from outside of the district. But above that is a facilitator, above the coach, who may work with 3 or 4 other districts. And the whole purpose of Reading First is teaching the teachers a different way, a way that's based on scientific fact, not the latest fad.
Right, okay.
That they get results from.
So is this more of a phonics-based system, or is it?
It does 5 areas, the phonics, the phonetic awareness, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. Those are the 5 areas they work on.
Because I have a 2-year-old. She'll be 2 years old in about 6 weeks, and so you can just start seeing all the different patterns that are coming out. And so hopefully that sort of helps the kids at risk and the teachers to identify this.
Right.
Has this been relatively successful, or is it?
Yes. I mean, it's only been in since 2001 when No Child Left Behind was implemented. Our hope is that it does get reauthorized so that that program can stay in place. But a lot of schools are working hard to make sure that the structure is there, and so when the monies that come with the No Child Left Behind for this particular program perhaps are no longer there, they'll be there and they'll be able to carry on. I mentioned to one of our people about it that it's wonderful for the schools to have this placed in, but a lot of schools who are not on this at-risk list still have children who have difficulty learning to read. So it would be really great, and I think they're looking at it in some of the teaching institutes, to implement that into the program so that the new teachers coming out will have had that, which will enable kids in all districts then to have a better shot at being good readers.
That's great. And I think the thing that you bring to the table with being involved in both the ISD and the public education as a school board member is sort of how this works in rural Michigan, which is great. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing? Are you doing anything with math and sciences, from standards or improvements?
Well, you know that they've done the content expectations, high school content expectations, and so our hope is that that's going to make it a lot easier for teachers in teaching, because everybody knows what every 8th grader or every 9th grader should know, and we should see some success with that as the new high school requirements go through. And this is the first year that is affecting the 8th graders this year.
How have you heard, I know we spent a lot of time working on this last year, and State Board of Ed's input was very helpful. What are you sort of hearing out in the initial hinterlands on how the academic requirements are doing?
Well, I think it was too soon to really know, but a lot of schools are looking at, in my own home school district, next year is going to implement trimesters instead of semesters.
Any particular reason why they're?
I think basically it's so they can get all the things in that they want to, because there's been a lot of people have been concerned about the VOC programs, and we know VOC Ed is really important for a lot of kids to have that. I think it's so new that to know how that's going to work for sure, I can't say. But I know a lot of schools in the state are doing that, and will there have to be changes made as we go along? Well, I think with all things that are new, sometimes you do. At this point, well, we know maybe there'll be some kids that's going to take 5 years to go through high school instead of 4.
Sure.
So we have to be able to work that out so that the high school graduation or dropout rate doesn't affect the adequate yearly progress standings when kids maybe take 4 years or 5 years to go through.
Well, you bring up a point, because I know there's been a lot of discussion on sort of considering going from a 16-year-old staying in school to 17 or 18. And that you think part of that, sort of those discussions are being driven by No Child Left Behind and making sure that the kids have got...
Well, kids that drop out that young, they stand a greater risk of ending up in our criminal system. And the idea, of course, is we'd like to see them all stay in and go. Personally, I know that if you've got a student who's doesn't want to be there and they disrupt everybody else, I don't know if that's going to be helpful either. But the idea is that it's a big world out there and they need all the education they can get, so that it's going to help them. Without a high school diploma, I don't know how kids are going to survive. And it looks like they need college too. Right. I mean, it's not just high school anymore, it is a 2-year or 4-year program.
Well, some of the things that we've been working on as chairman of the Commerce Committee is, how do you get the workforce trained for the next generation?
Right.
And the things that have been very interesting to me is that my generation, if you got an MBA, that was sort of your ticket to ride, because America's preeminence as a business economic center.
Right.
A lot of the discussions are going on is then mathematics is going to continue to be one of the even more important, and maybe even past MBAs. You get a master's in mathematics just because of the amount of requirements that are going to be involved in this next generation of jobs.
Right.
And so that's kind of interesting. And then you sort of start seeing these initiatives on foreign languages.
Oh, that's going to be huge, I think.
Yeah. Are you reviewing that at all in the state board?
Well, we've we kind of requested that they all have at least 1 year of foreign language. I think for schools and I know money is always the problem, but I see Chinese and Spanish as 2 of the biggies that I think kids need, because that's the world we're in. The mindset, years ago they could graduate and go on and get a good job in a shop, GM, Buick, whatever, and have a good life. And there's still that thought out there with a lot of people, oh, it's going to come back and that we can do that. We don't need to go on. But that's not going to come back, and we're a new era, and so education is just more important than ever. I
had the opportunity, because our district goes from Sault Ste. Marie down to Traverse City and over to Posen, so it's a very diverse area. And the manufacturing shops are so much more automated today than they were even 5 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And so what you thought as far as a person operating a press, those are most of those jobs, or many of those jobs, have been automated. But it's the person that's monitoring the equipment
that has to have that education that can handle that equipment.
And so there are fewer people that are getting paid more money in those facilities, and I think that goes directly back to what you're talking about. Is this high school graduation is a minimum, and you're going to need a couple years of college to.
There are some jobs to go in and to be, quote, a custodian. They have to have 2 years of college, in order to operate all of the equipment.
Right. Well, we were looking at, we did a lot of work with the machine tool industry. And, the mindset of a journeyman, those were a lot of skill sets that you went through, some apprentice training, but a lot of it was on the job. And like you say, today it's 2 years of numeric control and automation studies to be able to compete in those jobs that are on today. What other types of things are you reviewing, or do you see over the horizon happening at the Department of Ed?
Well, one of the things we're going to be looking at are the social studies. We still don't have the content expectations in those, and that will be a big thing to do.
Okay. Now, how do you, for our listeners, what are content expectations?
Well, it's a book that gets printed that has everything written in what should be taught. The idea when they started out with content expectations, for instance, in Traverse City, if you moved to Howell or Three Rivers, your child should be being taught the same thing at that grade level that he or she was in Traverse City. And so it makes it much easier for teachers and for the whole state, even for the testing it should be, because all of these kids should be learning this amount of content. Maybe not in the same way. We don't tell the school districts, well, you got to teach it this way, this way, this way, but it's kind of a guideline, and it's written easier for them to work on it in the school.
Now, this helps so that we have abilities to sort of judge how students are doing in the grades.
Right.
And in the No Child Left Behind, there's some requirements for some, I believe, testing. Is that?
Yes.
And so that sort of helps have a consistent content, maybe not in the order, but have a consistent content so we can find out how our students are doing on a broad basis.
Right.
What, are you seeing any other sort of trends in the emerging besides the foreign languages in education?
Well, one of the things we, as you know, for the high school requirements is 1 year of online learning, because we're all going to be lifelong learners, and the computer and all that is here, so they need to have that experience.
Now, are you sort of reviewing that course content too, as far as?
We haven't actually. No, I don't think that we really have. There are some that are taking a class for credit that way, and others that are just taking a class depending on their schools and what's offered. Some may do some of the foreign language on virtual learning like that.
And within this foreign language requirement and sort of the Romance languages that, you know, I studied Spanish in high school. How are we supplying enough Chinese teachers? Are you guys sort of reviewing that, or is it too early to tell?
Well, that is